Hello and welcome to All the Horrible Things.
Yeah.
We're your hosts.
Welcome to All the Horrible Things.
So what are we doing today? What are we discussing on our premiere episode?
Well, I personally thought the best way to start a new horror podcast in 2022 would be to cover some of our favorite horror films from 2021.
Sounds good to me. I like that idea.
Top 10 style.
Top 10 style. I'm digging it. I mean, it's always a little arbitrary because how do you compare comedy horror to psychological horror? But we're going to do it and just say that it's right.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite genres because of that. There are so many subcategories of it that it's like falls under the horror umbrella.
That it does. And we are still kind of in a scary time. So I think as a whole, people have probably been avoiding horror these last 2 years because of this crazy pandemic. They don't want that extra dread and dealing with their own horrific realities. So as we maybe are hopefully starting to get out of this, as the Omicron flushes over everyone and hopefully everyone's getting vaccinated and boosted and they can stomach horror again. So for all those movies they missed in 21, we're bringing you the goods.
Think about it this way. Think about all of the amazing horror that is going to come from this. You know?
That's true.
I mean, every decade has like standout horror film, if not horror films, really based on the times. And what more good for a horror genre than, like a deadly virus?
Right. And we can talk about horror TV on a different cast, but I don't know if you're watching Station 11 on HBO, but it's hitting a little too close to home. We actually decided not to go to our Christmas New Orleans trip the day we watched the first 2 episodes because it kind of scared the shit out of us.
Really? That's impressive that the show had that type of impact.
It filled us with additional dread, plus like no spoiler alerts, but it takes place a lot in Chicago.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like we were getting shivved and the universe was telling us, don't get on a plane, stick around, stay in your bubble.
I saw that a lot of Chicago actors were getting cast for Station 11.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that puppy later.
That's just yet to come. So subscribe.
Yep.
Follow. We'll have to talk about all of our new handles for the podcast.
Yeah, that's true. So many handles. That's a horror story in itself.
Yeah.
I've lost track of who I really am with all my handles. I'm a fractured soul.
All right, let's jump into our top 10 favorite horror films of 2021.
And we're going backtrack, right? Because we got to give people that anticipation. What's their favorite?
Oh man, you want to go back and forth? Or you just want to list?
Let's go back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll go with our 10s. What's our 10th favorite horror-ish film of 2021?
Okay. My number 10 was Willy's Wonderland.
Willy's Wonderland. It didn't make my list, but it's on my C list. It's like it's worth seeing.
Yeah.
Why did you put it on your list? How did it make your top 10?
Man, this movie, it's like it was made for me. I someone who grew up just loving going to that type of venue, if you will.
Right.
Chicago.
Were you old enough? Are you old you are old like me, where it was Showbiz Pizza before it was Chuck E. Cheese, right?
Showbiz Pizza. And then it was...
Is that the jingle?
Yeah, it was Showbiz Pizza. And then they changed it to Chuck E. Cheese's.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Why did they think a little rat would be more appealing than a big bear? Why did that switch?
Man, I don't know.
Neither do I. Because I found Showbiz, the big fluffy bear playing the banjo much more appealing than the little rat-faced Chucky. Well, that's me. I
No,
might be biased
you're right. I
against
guess I never
rats.
thought about that. Why would you change it from a lovable animal to maybe one of the worst?
I guess because he likes cheese.
Yeah, yeah,
That's just got to
gotta
be
be
it,
it.
right? But
Yeah.
cats like cheese. I think there's a nicer animal you can go with that has an affinity for cheese, but I guess rats are the number one affiliation with cheese.
I think you're right.
Anyways, so yeah, hit us. Why exactly did that appeal to you? How many times you go to Chuck E. Cheese as a kid where it really
Well,
kind of sunk in?
it wasn't just Chuck E. Cheese for me. It was also Enchanted Castle in
Ah, yes.
Lombard, Illinois, in the Chicagoland area. I it was like the video games, the other kids, the pizza.
The pizza was
Um,
good at Enchanted Castle. It's
yeah,
just okay at Chuck E. Cheese, if you ask me. But for those who don't know, Enchanted Castle is like a much more complex, adult, variable, similar venue. What do you call these places? What are they actually
yeah.
called? Just kid zones?
Let's call them kid zones. Yeah,
Okay. Wonderlands, I guess. Lands of wonders, venues of wonder.
yeah.
So yeah, what about the movie really appealed?
Oh, Nicolas Cage. Nicolas
How many lines
Cage.
did he have?
Oh my God, that was the most brilliant part of this. Is that he may have said a couple words, but his performance was. I mean, this movie was just so mysterious, and it had this really fun lore. You know, the as you find out what's going on, no spoilers, but the reason why these animatronic uh, murderous uh, puppets of human scale. Uh, it was just fun. It was like the perfect vehicle for Nicolas Cage.
I agree. I
Yeah.
couldn't look away. And I went, Pig came out this last year too, which he
Hmm.
stars in. And I kind of went into that thinking it would be a little more horror, and it wasn't. But boy, does he have a girthier role in that than this, because he is kind of the secondary character in this in a way. He's the
Yeah.
hero, but
Yeah.
really it does follow those who end up in there and get knocked out one by one.
Yeah.
But he is the hero. He is I guess, our main protagonist, if you will. But I would agree. He knocked it out of the park with just playing video games, essentially. What was he playing? What was the game he played
It was.
predominantly in that one?
I think it had to have been a fictional game. I don't remember the
Okay.
exact title, but it was it was like on a schedule for him. You know, he had to have that drink, and he had to play. It was a pinball. Yeah, it was a pinball game.
It was a pinball machine.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he was
That's right. That
dancing.
makes sense.
The dancing. It was like the. It was so fun.
It
It
was
was
a
so
movie
fun.
unto itself. There's nothing we've ever seen like it. And
Correct.
as somebody who's just for the first time this past year played Five Nights at Freddy's, because that's been all the rage with the pipsqueaks, it actually hit home even more with me because I got that Oculus system, and that's where I did the Freddy
Hmm.
got fingered. No, that's a Tom Green movie. That's
That's a movie.
terrible. Five Nights at Freddy, where they do these horrible animatronic monsters are trying to kill you, and you have the same job as Nicolas Cage does in this movie, and you're just like trying to shut the doors to keep them out and stuff. And it's the scariest game I ever played. Maybe I just haven't played it enough, but
I've
I
heard.
stopped
I've
using my
heard.
VR system for about 2 months after I put that thing on and really got spooked that first time. It, this movie mirrored that so much so that I think they saw the popularity of Five Nights and Freddy's. Like, we gotta do this. Turn it into a movie quick, because I'm surprised there hasn't been a movie of
I I will
such a popular video
say I
game.
don't know the production or the backstory about Willy's Wonderland, but it may have been rushed. You know, put
Yes,
together to meet these needs. Like
it,
who can we get in a hurry? Nicolas Cage,
right.
and who can we, in a single location horror is my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In some ways, the haste I feel like worked for it. I agree with you; it did seem a little hasty, but when you're going to one of these places, it's like one of those backup birthday plan sort of thing. Oh, we don't want to have a party. Let's just go to Chuck E. Cheese. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? it kind of worked tonally and thematically for me. So I also did like that, but it didn't quite make my top 10.
That's okay. I understand.
My number 10 is an offering of Mr. Shyamalan's, and it's old. And I have to say, I got some beef with. He's going to come up later. Um, but Servant is amazing. If you're not watching Servant, his show on Apple TV, you got to watch it.
All right.
Old doesn't quite live up to the quality of Servant, but I still felt like it dealt with the terror of aging and essentially not being as virile and alive and understood by others. It kind of hit all these fears that I have as I'm growing older. I lost half my hearing in my right ear 2 years ago. That might even be COVID related. We're not even sure how it happened. But that's like a big thing. The one person goes deaf, one person starts to go blind. It is not your typical horror, but to me, it was this existential dread that he did so well. Setting aside all the twists at the ends and all that jazz, I did like a lot of the characters. There's one moment in a cave that is legitimately freaky,
Yes.
if you can remember that one, with the young ingenue in the piece. That moment was something I hadn't really seen before. But really, it's more about this just existential horror that shit, we all gonna die. And what's scarier than us dying is watching those around us die. You know, that's what I really felt like it hit home more than anything. It's not like slasher scary. It's more like real life scary, hyperbolized.
Sure.
What did you see? That's one of the few ones I saw 6 horrors at the theater this year. That was one of them. And I'm glad I did.
I didn't see that one at the theater. I rented it. Yeah, the casting was really really great. I forget the actor's name from Hereditary.
Hereditary?
Oh man,
Yes.
he's so
So
good.
he's the young son. Like,
Yeah.
as I mean, everyone knows the premise that these people start to age rapidly on this beach. But that's Alex Wolff from Hereditary,
Yes, thank
who
you.
ends up being of great significance at the end of that movie.
Yeah.
Which to me is really my biggest complaint about Hereditary, because I loved it until the payoff.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point. He did great. I love seeing Gael Garcia in like anything he does.
Oh yeah, yeah. Brilliant
And
actor.
the mother, I thought, was a surprise too. Vicky Krieps. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right, but I thought she was really effective because she's the one that goes deaf. So I was really, really relating with her struggles. And then Gael's the one who starts to lose his vision.
Yeah,
and
that was oddly beautiful. Their relationship.
It was, and the way that they were able to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, we see them grow old together. You know, like we see a relationship that is troubled, which is I think why they were, on the vacation to begin with, and a lot of that unfolds. But to see them, growing old on that beach together was oddly beautiful.
And it was kind of like a microcosm of how their relationship might have gone throughout the entirety of their existence, right? Because they're still seeing their kids age together. They're getting over marital issues that they had going on to the beach in a way they might have. I felt like we really did get to see a lifelong relationship compacted via theirs.
Yeah.
Was there any issues you had with Old? Because it didn't get the best reviews.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about that. Why do you think it didn't do well? Because
I think it's because the freaking preview was so amazing that it could never live up to the preview, and people went in there with such high expectations that maybe some of the moments felt a little predictable or hack even, compared to, I guess, in my head, what I took out of it, I feel like I was able to a little bit more than was on the screen. You know what I mean? I was seeing the metaphors. I was digging deeper via my own, just my own nature. And I'm not sure the profundity that I got from it was as translatable to a normal audience.
Right. I honestly think people see M. Night Shyamalan's name and they just immediately, you know, count it out. So it's like they've had it because he's done so many, um, he's done a lot of great work, but I think he's toyed with his audience at times.
Yeah.
And I think
Where do
people
you
are
think
just,
it switched on him? Because he was a trusted
well, I
asset
think,
until
after doing something so great like Sixth Sense and Unbreakable,
it
um,
Signs.
Signs was great, but then like
I
right
love
after,
Signs.
was that?
Signs to me is maybe his best, and I
Oh,
know Mel
I
Gibson
too. I
is
love the alien.
controversial,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
But
that one really hit home. That scene with the alien going across
oh
in the
god,
found
the alley
footage
at
or
the birthday
whatever,
party.
just
Yeah,
it stuck with me. But after that, what are we talking about? Was
we're
it the
talking about the
village where people
village and the
were?
lady in the water. I think
Ugh,
really threw a wrench in his work.
yeah, which is too bad because the premise of the village
So good.
was good. I'm not sure why that got. I guess it was just a
I think
rushed
people were just
ending,
like
or
pissed off by the fact that they almost felt lied to,
right.
which was the point.
Yes, exactly. Such a great cast too.
Yeah, yeah. But now I feel like he has to work extra hard to convince an audience to enjoy his work, which is unfortunate.
And I think that's why Servant is really doing well and
Mm,
has me hooked because I don't know, it's the long form. I think he might be more conducive to the long form and building up a mystery in a way that he's kind of forced to resolve, sometimes ham handedly, in a 2 hour movie that
mm.
he is able to actually flesh out.
My number nine is something I don't believe you got to see.
Oh.
Psycho Gorman.
Oh, I want to see it so bad. It's on my list.
It is, I think, some. I don't know much about the filmmaker, but I would guarantee that he grew up on the same time we did, and this was like his chance to take something like he was probably a fan of like Monster Squad, um, other fun 80s. I mean, not necessarily Goonies because it wasn't horror, but the idea here is that the children are our main stars, but they're dealing with
Yeah.
something very adult, which was a lot of like 80s movies. Uh, it just so happens in this movie, though, that they're like in charge of a monster. They have control over this, and if you haven't seen like the trailer, even the monster build and the practical effects are so fun. Um, yeah, it's like if you got to make your own movie in the 80s now,
And
it's
I
so
heard
much.
that the little girl is especially good, the
Oh, she's a
lead
great actor. Yeah, the performances are
child actor.
great. The subject matter is really fun. Um, it's fantastical. It's almost like you could throw the word fantasy into the genre here as well.
Yeah, I'll admit I've seen the preview and it does look hilarious. And I don't know if you saw X-Men Apocalypse, but Psycho Gorman looks a lot like Apocalypse, this blue
Like
guy,
Oscar
right? This blue
Isaac's,
bald guy.
yeah.
Um, and he was just laughable in
Yeah.
Apocalypse, but I think it seems like this is a more suitable place for a big blue demon. Okay, my number 9 comes in with Saint Maud. You seen it?
I haven't, and I'm kicking myself for having not seen
So
that.
yeah, we both have number 9s that we haven't seen. So it's religious horror, but it
Mhm.
takes a really interesting approach to it. Because you have this girl who ultimately is a caretaker for this kind of like big shot lady who has cancer. She's deteriorating fast, and she's kind of like coming out with all these hard truths that this person of faith that's watching her is having a hard time stomaching. So she's essentially trying to save her soul.
Okay.
But this person also, this young woman, is a bit psychotic herself and sees and hears things. So uh, she really, really struggles with trying to save this woman's soul who doesn't necessarily believe in souls. Um, it's can be tedious at times. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like that pays off because it really matches with the tedium of religious ceremonies. Sometimes
Hmm.
it really pays off at the end, though. The end is unforgettable. It'll knock your socks off. Uh, and if anything, it made me more of the non-theist that I am today
Yeah,
because it kind of doesn't lampoon, I guess, religious thought because in a way it kind of edges on suggesting there are supernatural stuff beyond this world, but
sure.
at its heart, I think it is like this criticism of those who get lost in ideologies.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it criticizes those who have like nothing, who are just ready to die and drinking, smoking, and living debaucherous lives. So it's these
me.
two really contrasting characters. But the weird thing is, there's no middle ground in the movie, which I found one of the
Interesting.
more interesting
That
aspects.
sounds great. It's so funny. Like, I grew up religious. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but something about religious horror, and maybe it's because of The Exorcist and what it did, but something about religious horror is one of my favorite subgenres. It couldn't tell you why.
And like The Exorcist, this primarily takes place in one home. There are some outside shots, including that final
Okay.
shot that I mentioned. That's phenomenal. But the claustrophobia really adds to it too.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you not see the whole world when you're myopic on your belief system, sort of thing?
Yeah.
It's worth watching. Absolutely, it's a different kind of horror, but it's worth watching.
I like it.
Shall we to the eighth?
Yeah. Number 8 for me was Lamb.
Lamb made my list.
Yeah. Lamb
Yeah,
is
I loved it.
so interesting because I heard so many mixed reviews going into this, and yet I'm like, I didn't care. I mean, this is A24 and
Mhm.
a level of weirdness that, I mean, was explained in the trailer, but and you would think that was somewhat of a spoiler, but it wasn't. It it just fueled my curiosity even more, and I loved the relationship. I loved this couple.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of feel bad for them and their situation, especially living out in the middle of nowhere. A family would certainly, you think, help with a lot of that. And the cast was, I mean, obviously brilliantly performed, but the characters were well written. The brother or brother-in-law, however you want to look
Yes.
at it, was a really great, just not only performance, but just a really great um, wrench. I guess you want to
Yeah, a
like just
foil
really,
for them.
yeah,
In a lot of ways, he kind of like was the audience. Like,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
What are you guys doing?
yeah,
Why?
yeah. He
Why
was us.
is
Like,
that
what?
lamb in a wool
This
sweater?
is weird. Don't think I should approve of this, and yet because we're family, I'm okay with it. And then back and forth. You never understand if he really 100% jumps on board with it, because I don't want to spoil anything. But oh man, without giving anything away with the ending, I loved it, and I can understand maybe why somebody wouldn't. But I think it
I
has
just
to.
wanted more. I loved
Yes.
it,
Oh
but
man.
like, I just know there's not going to be a sequel to this film.
Correct.
Rightfully so, but it's just like I could see some people being frustrated that you finally get to something really, really kind of jaw dropping,
Yes.
and then it's gonna over.
But that's maybe something that we're losing in movies because there are so many sequels
Yeah,
in our current. You know,
yeah, it doesn't need a sequel, but I
it
just
doesn't need a sequel, but it was so well done that it left you wanting more. Which is it's funny. It's like that is its biggest problem, and yet its
right.
greatest success. But yeah,
It's
that
it's
was
a
my 8.
heart wrenching family tale, pretty much. It's
It was
about
beautiful.
family.
Again, it also felt like a bit of a fantasy fairy tale in a maybe it is in a different culture, but
It did feel like that. It was
yeah,
very fairy tale esque.
yeah.
What was the lesson though? Because fairy tales always have lessons.
Well,
What were we supposed to get from
the
that?
lesson was repercussions. Certainly, you know, it's weird because you don't want to look at this couple as if they had done something wrong
Hmm.
for something then to be taken away. However, Numi's character,
Right. She does do something wrong, if you ask
yes,
me.
yes, but then for
And the
the couple themselves,
retribution,
yeah, for them to both to
the
suffer, I mean, that could destroy their marriage again. That's why this
right.
was so good.
So that was 8.
Hmm.
My 8th is The Swarm.
This is another one I haven't seen,
It's a
and
French film.
yes, wasn't on
Another
my
one
radar.
about family, actually. Highly
Yeah.
suggest. I know it's on one of the streaming sites right now. Um, Amazing performances. It's really about a mother and daughter more than anything else, but it's under the guise of this woman who is really struggling financially, and she has to figure out a means of providing for her family. She has a son and daughter, but the relationship with the daughter is really paramount here because she's coming of age. She's like at the point where she might like leave and not be part of the family anymore. So this woman starts breeding
Whoa,
locust of all things,
not okay.
and it gets to the point where she's kind of breeding a new kind of locust that is scary. I'll just leave it at that.
So
Um, the sheer
my
amount and the nature of these locusts is horrifying, and to me, it was all representative of the swarm is metaphoric for the fear that she has of losing her daughter, not being the mother that she could have been. It's like this overwhelming black cloud that is eating away at her, literally and figuratively,
wow.
and that she's essentially sacrificing herself at times because not to give anything, well, I can give it a little away. She lets the locust have a little taste of her.
Oh boy.
I'll leave it at that. But yeah, she's literally and figuratively giving pieces of her. She's like the giving tree in this one.
Yeah.
And it just happens instead of an axe, it's this big swarm of locusts that's
Wow.
taking things away so that the her brood can live on, her human brood.
Maybe in a negative way, it looked like the birds. Like a new spin on Hitchcock. I think that's maybe why I didn't watch it. And but the way you describing it sounds,
First of
way
all, I would
different.
give anything for a remake of The Birds directed by Rob Zombie. That is my ultimate dream.
Wow,
As a
by
Rob
Rob
Zombie
Zombie.
Birds, that would be phenomenal.
Said he's
I've
doing
been doing the
the
monsters, which I'm a little less
monsters.
excited about than where he doing the birds. But I would say it's not like the birds in that why these creatures become what they are is very directed by human. Just don't cry too much when you see what happens to the pet.
Oh
I'll leave
man,
it at
this
that.
that should be an
Always the
episode.
pets.
I was
Those
just gonna
poor
say that should be an episode we do. Um,
pet deaths.
yeah, like horror movies love killing animals,
They really do.
and it's
It's sad.
to really push you, or if you haven't already sided with the main character, well, they
I mean,
just
we get
John
it. I
Wicked his
mean,
pet,
both of us only have fur babies, so
right?
when you do have a family tale, you got to toss in the fur baby too for
Yeah,
guys like us who can only really relate to losing a fur baby
yeah.
versus a human alien thing. Ugh. Anyways, what do you got for
Well,
7?
number 7, Halloween Kills.
Oh, this one's a little personal to us.
Sure, yeah, my love for
I
Michael
get why it's
Myers.
on your list. It didn't make my top 10 though, Mike.
And I understand that, and I also know a lot of people who were disappointed in it overall, which was upsetting to me. I think it's gonna fit way better as a new trilogy, and its
Mhm.
second. The sequel to a successful remake is always gonna get you know overanalyzed. It wasn't as good as
Right.
the first one. I guarantee you, after Halloween Ends comes out, you're gonna go back, you're gonna watch Halloween Kills, and you're gonna appreciate what it did for the overall story. I mean, fans should have known that going into this. This was not just just another sequel.
Right.
I think people speaking of Rob Zombie, I think people get a little upset about remakes that don't necessarily meet the fans' needs or wants. But I really feel like this one is it's just a continuation. I mean, we all know
Right.
that there's more coming, and the kills were so fun.
They were fun.
I mean, there's a
And for
scene
me,
where
where it almost made it was just the fact that they brought back such important characters from the
yes,
first film.
I love that. I love that. And they're doing that. If you're a fan of the TV show Cobra Kai, it's a very similar thing they're doing. They're bringing back our beloved characters from our childhood, and especially when they're played by the same actor, I can get on board with that.
Me too. The other time I recently saw that was I did cave and watch that new Home Alone,
Oh, I haven't
Home
seen
Sweet
it.
Alone, and they bring back Buzz,
Oh
but
man.
he was so great he stole the movie. But then I found out about 2 weeks ago he got arrested for beating his girlfriend or something. So there's nothing funny about that. It's
No,
just,
it's
yeah,
not
that's
funny.
the
It's
bad
just
example.
sure somebody
Which
gets another
sucks because he
shot.
was so good in the film, and then to see his second shot just wasted by his own idiocy and
It just goes to show you, just
vanity.
don't look at actors as your heroes,
Right.
or they're humans, many flaws. Going
Yes.
back to the movie really quick, I got one more thing to say. Aside from some issues I had, like I don't know if I was 100% on board with the what are they saying? The chant when they're in the
Oh,
hospital.
evil dies
Evil,
tonight.
evil dies tonight.
Oh,
Evil
God.
dies
He
tonight
said that so many times.
was a little overused, and I didn't necessarily get on board with that. Having said that,
It took away the seriousness of the
yeah,
film
yeah,
a lot for me.
yeah. Having
As
said that,
did the sheriff who's in the first one, who just like has no wrap up in that first one, but he comes back with the cowboy hat. Why is he wearing a cowboy hat in Haddonfield, Illinois? Like it drives me absolutely up the wall.
yeah, it's like
Why
a
is he
U.S.
wearing that big
Marshals. Like,
10-gallon cowboy hat?
yeah, that was a bit much too. I don't know about you, but there was a point where I honestly felt bad for Michael Myers.
Oh
And
my
I really
gosh.
wanted him to get up off the ground and defend himself. Is that wrong? It's probably wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of wrong. I think so.
I don't know. I just had like this. Maybe it's because he's been
I understand where you're coming
romanticized.
from. But I mean, this is a psychosexual maniac we're talking about
Yeah,
who is ultimately an incel at the age of 65, whatever the hell he is now, right? Which I think is at the root of his psychosis.
J-
Um,
to
but with what happened to him, I struggled with him having another movie. Let's put it that way,
do you know what? Do
because
you know what
that
I
was
think it
pretty
was for
extreme.
me? And I don't mean to get political, but I think when I saw that angry mob,
Mm-hmm.
I think it sort of connected to what's going on, just in our society, in our
Right.
country. I don't like the idea of people getting together with the idea of hate, and I think
Right.
that hit me, and I think I
Yes.
just felt bad for him in the moment because I do not approve of angry mobs.
I see that. I definitely do, especially considering, well, what happened 1 year ago, 2 days
Yeah,
ago.
yeah,
This is January 8th right now. So I do get that. I do understand that it really was going for that a mob mentality, even if they think what they're doing is righteous,
right, right.
is as scary as one man who's a fucking nutcase.
100%.
Pardon my language.
No, 100%. I think that also goes to the idea just within the horror genre. Whenever you can get a group of people together, say like that scene in The Mist, or
Mm,
even like a murderous family. Whenever you can get a group of people on the same page to do something scary, that man, that terrifies me.
that was the irony of it. Evil dies tonight,
Yeah,
but that mob then
yeah.
themselves sort
They
of.
get
I
together and
mean, they
they're
ultimately
murderers.
make mistakes
Yeah,
as a mob. So
Yeah, and I think that will probably
Yeah.
be addressed in Halloween Ends.
What do you think about seeing his face as much as we did?
Never a fan of that, and that's one of my biggest
No, me neither.
flaws with the Rob Zombie um,
Mm,
remake. I understand some people like the idea, and I think it has a lot to do with like murder documentaries and like wanting to get inside of the head of a murderer. But when we saw Michael Myers as a child, that kind of ruined it for me. It took it out of this idea that he is somehow, I don't want to say magical. I'm just saying he's got powers. He's
right,
Nobody can withstand the amount of beating and stabbing and gunshots. So
right.
when they humanized him in the remake, I didn't care for it. So to answer your question, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of like seeing a masked murderer's face.
That's a good point. I like the way that you put it. That like ultimately the mob's belief in him and how evil he is almost makes him stronger. It
It
kind
gave
of
him
reminds me of
power.
that
Yeah,
Usual Suspects, where the greatest trick devil ever did was convincing the world he didn't exist.
right, right.
So with this whole mob obsessed with him, it empowers him. But I still think he took one hell of a beating. And okay,
Yeah.
there was one kill that bothered me too. I'm not gonna say who died, but it was a death on the staircase toward the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't like that one for some reason. I
I
thought
agree. I
I
agree.
wanted that character to have a better death. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And how
It
about
seemed a little weird.
the couple? Is it Big John, Little John?
Oh.
Love,
Yeah.
loved them.
I did
What a
too. And Tommy
fun
from the first one, I love that kid in the first Halloween. And
yeah.
then you had who's the actor?
Anthony
It's
Michael
the guy
Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall. I thought he did a really good job with Tommy, even though he was kind of the ringleader of the Evil Dies Tonight.
Yeah.
But I remember I recently rewatched Halloween, and my lady friend was all like, "You talk about how much you like this little redhead actor too much, because oh, it's so good. I love Tommy. He's great in it.
Yeah.
Tommy almost steals the movie, but
Yeah.
it was really cool to see him come back. I did like that.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, so that was 7.
That was number 7. Yeah.
That was number 7. So for me, it's a classic horror story.
Okay. I
Another
haven't seen this one
foreign
either.
horror movie about a ride share gone awry. Ultimately, this guy picks up a bunch of people and they get in a car accident. The next thing they know, because they all kind of go unconscious, so they wake up and the car's been moved and they're just in the middle of the woods. And they come across this religious looking temple sort of thing. And it gets crazy. It gets very grisly. And there's a really fun twist at the end, too, that
Okay.
I didn't see coming, believe it or not. And I highly suggest it. Nobody would know because it's all foreign actors, but had a really great atmosphere. And some of the deaths were some of the grisliest deaths I've ever seen. It packed a punch. Let's put it that way. And that's something I always worry about. When we get in these cars with these ride shares, Ubers or Lyfts, you're getting in a
Right.
car with a stranger who then has the ability to take you wherever he wants. If he has like those locks that the game style just disappear and you can't get out. So I don't know. It hit home for me. Well, my 6 we've talked about. Lamb, loved it.
Yeah.
I got it ranked a little higher than you. I do
Yeah.
like that esoteric weirdness. But since we have talked about that one, I'll use this opportunity to talk about another great horror movie that didn't make my list. It almost did. Might be a little too funny to have made the list, though, is The Trip with Noomi Rapace, another
Yep.
Danish film. That was amazing about a couple who's struggling and ultimately want to kill each other,
Yeah.
literally. And then 3 ex-cons who have escaped from jail come and complicate things, complicate their plans to murder each other. It's a
That's
sweet
so
story
funny
in
that you're
a
bringing
very
this up right now.
strange way.
That's my number 6,
Is it?
and I watched it because you told me to watch it. I thought it was so fun, and it borderline, if not, is a horror comedy. But
Yes.
it shouldn't be. but the characters, and I think that's what really made it for me. Between the three villains who are
Mhm.
weirdly funny, again, they shouldn't be.
And
The
also
father,
ominous, very sinister dudes too.
oh my god, yeah, there's a very sinister scene in the basement, which
Yes.
by no means did I find funny. But then they're able to come
No,
out of it with like some weird spin on them having lived in the attic for the last couple days, and
that's
yeah,
right. In a strange way, it's a comedic horror romance because their relationship is, I mean, has a lot of the same twists and turns as When Harry Met Sally,
yeah.
but with blood and guts and guns. So, yeah, I dug it. It didn't make that and Werewolves Within are too funny for me to put on my list, but I loved them both.
Hey, listen, that's my number. We're around five.
Yeah.
Werewolves Within is my number five. But
Oh, nice. Perfect.
yeah, I, you know, before we started creating these lists, we didn't necessarily say, that horror comedy couldn't be on here, but I
No,
understand,
no.
like I had mentioned before, this genre of horror has so many just avenues you can go down. It just so
True.
happened that, and it's, it's really rare that you get quality horror comedy because it's very difficult to pull off. I thought Werewolves Within was really well made, really
Oh, it was a
well
delight.
acted. Sam Richardson has proven himself that he's a leading man.
He's
That
the
guy,
best. He's the only really good thing in the Tomorrow War.
yes,
He kept me
yes,
watching that movie
yeah,
as he was so funny in it, and he's just as funny in Werewolves
yeah.
Within. The whole cast is amazing. Michaela Watkins, I could watch forever.
I know
She's one of
she's
those SNL players that I wish had stuck around longer, but I heard that Lauren was like, "You should be doing bigger things. There's bigger things for
wow,
you than skit comedy." And I agree with him. I think she's had some really strong roles since she's left SNL, and this one
yeah,
was great. It was something we haven't seen her do either. So my five is really the only super comedic one. I couldn't not put it on the list because everyone's talking shit about it, and I absolutely adored it. Ghostbusters Afterlife.
oh
I
yeah,
don't care what
yeah,
anybody says. I loved it. I
yeah,
was so emotional at the end of a Ghostbusters movie, like I never expected. I really felt like it channeled the energy of the first film, and the way that it ultimately mimicked the archetypes of the four from the first film in the
yep,
kids was pitch perfect to me.
yeah,
Interestingly enough, I felt like the weak link was Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things. I felt like
yeah.
he was probably my least favorite and
Very
most
secondary
stock.
character. Yeah, I have to say, I just watched this the other night, and I was very concerned at the start of it. The movie starts off, and this is a something I don't want to spoil, but like, let's just say a character dies at the very beginning of the movie.
Right.
I was very scared how they were going to handle this. Like, I was like,
Yes.
oh no, are they really
Me
doing
too.
this? And the payoff was such a lovely
It
payoff.
was. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't. I this year I've been. I used to cry a lot more in films. This
yeah,
year, this is one of the few that actually hit me.
yeah.
And
And um, I thought Paul Rudd was going to be like more of a major character. Not that
me
he
too.
wasn't a major character. I thought they're bringing this guy in to be the comedic relief, which was not necessary. I think
I
just
loved his character, and I
yeah,
related with it because he was a substitute
he was a
teacher.
substitute teacher
So
teaching
I
summer
really
school.
understand like his hesitancy to really deal with the kids because he's there
He
for a
throws a movie
temporary
on,
slot. Yes. What did he show them? He shows them Cujo,
and then he shows some
Chucky.
Child's Play. Yeah,
Yeah. So I thought it was a
on
perfect amount of
VHS.
Paul Rudd.
Yeah,
And Carrie Coon is always great.
I love
I
Carrie
bought
Coon.
into their
Love
romance,
Tracy
actually.
Letts that they throw in the hardware
Oh,
store.
that's right.
Yeah,
And for me, beyond McKenna Grace, who's kind of the lead child, the podcast kid stole it.
so
He was
funny,
hilarious.
so funny.
I mean, to me,
Um,
he was kind of like he was the comedy in the movie.
mhm.
I laughed the
And that's what
most
I
at him.
mean by like I thought they brought Paul Rudd in for that role, but it was this kid podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah,
And of course, as people know, some of the old players do pop up.
yeah,
And I felt like how they were used was justified and
and the
quite
right
satisfying.
amount, and the right amount. You
Yes.
know, it could have
Oh,
been
and the
very, yeah,
perfect dialogue for each of them.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely gonna be rewatching that one soon. I saw that actually in Austin at the Alamo Draft House, which was like
Really
the one thing in Austin I wanted to do more than anything else is go to an
go
Alamo
to
Draft
the
House,
Alamo
and
Draft
it
House.
lived
Yeah,
up to my expectations. It's
oh, that's
next to the
great.
ArcLight that's now dead in LA. This is my favorite theater. So props to Alamo Draft House in Austin. It really. Oh, not only did I see it there, but they were serving adult ecto coolers during the movie.
I
So I had
think
a
I saw
nice
someone posted about
ecto
this online.
cooler where they put in some gin, and I loved. Maybe that's why I love the movie, but it was great. It was
It doesn't
great either
hurt.
way.
It doesn't hurt.
It didn't
No one
hurt at
needs a
all.
Mecto cooler.
I'll forever love Ghostbusters. I assume as a kid you had a lot of the figures and
Oh
ecto
yeah,
pack and all
yeah,
that
yeah,
protoplasm pack.
yeah. My neighbor had everything: the suit, you know, the zip up jumper, the proton pack, the trap. I would just play with his toys. Yeah.
My favorite of mine, I actually had the firehouse where there's holes in
Oh
the
yeah.
ceiling. They're great, and then you put the ooze down from the top, and it seeps through the
Slimer. Yeah.
entirety of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that was some good merchandising. They knew what they were doing. I'm still buying. Actually, I got a couple Ghostbusters Funkos, so they still got me by the
Oh,
balls.
really? Yeah. There's
Oy.
that's a brand that
Okay,
I
what
don't
we
ever
got in
want to put on my
four?
number 4 for me was Coming Home in the Dark.
Whoa, haven't even heard of this one.
This is a New Zealand film that, in my opinion, is a horror film. I think it's being categorized as just being a thriller, but this movie opens up and like in the first 10 minutes, like there's just a horrific event. It is a blend of horror, revenge, stalking.
Hmm.
It's really really terrifying, and all of that is also like a road trip movie.
Hmm.
Weirdly, it um so well written, so well acted. The actors are not necessarily well known to us, but I think the main quote unquote villain in the movie's performance was one of the best of last year.
Hmm.
It's just streaming on Netflix, and everybody should check it out. It's really
Interesting.
well made.
Hey, where does it take place?
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand.
In
Okay,
New
and
Zealand.
and they're on the road trip for a lot of it.
So the story is about a woman and her children, and I believe it's a stepfather um,
Okay.
character, and they're on a trip, and these two guys just show up with a gun, and it's like that's all you need to
Oh
know.
goodness. It reminds me of that Flannery O'Connor short story. Oh, I can't remember the name of it right now, but ultimately it's a family kind of take a detour when they're on a trip, and then there's a couple guys with guns that just off them all.
Yeah, yeah, that's.
It's pretty horrifying.
I
I
mean,
should remember
that's
the name of that right now.
exactly it. This is one of the most horrific things that could happen to a family. You know, is just being so vulnerable. You're just relaxing, and then just some people show up and changes your lives.
Yeah.
Some really great lines in here. There's a moment where the villains he says, "You're gonna look back at this moment and wish you would have done something." Like he's talking about a specific moment, and it just would have changed everything. It's just wow, really
A
really good.
good man is hard to find. That's the Flannery O'Connor
Uh,
short story that sounds very, very familiar to what you're talking about with this one.
maybe it
Seems like a
is.
must see.
Maybe there's a connection. This, I mean, just even the title is creepy. Coming Home in the Dark is could mean so many different things, but
I'm actually kind of excited about these kind of girthier titles of late. You know,
yeah,
it's not all
yeah,
just Scream or
I know.
Halloween. We're getting a little more insight
Or
into what the actual movie
Lamb.
is, which I appreciate. And there's that one with Kristen, what's her face from Veronica Mars. It's got like the longest
Kristen
title in the
Bell has a
world.
movie coming out like next week called "The Woman in the Window Across the Street." something.
It's that's the extreme of it. I think they
Yeah,
maybe went a little
yeah,
too far, but I'm all for some hearty titles.
yeah. I
Well,
mean,
for
there's
me, that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. I was gonna say. I mean, think about the reason movies don't have these exciting titles, like you just mentioned, is because the marketing department doesn't want to deal with that.
Right.
You know,
We
I
think about
mean,
like the Last House on the Left. I love that.
it's
That's a little
brilliant.
longer.
Yeah.
Or House on Haunted Hill, or The Hills
Well,
Have Eyes.
I was just gonna say the one thing about the films that we're talking about is they tend to be more independent films,
Mm,
but House on Haunted Hill it was never an independent film. It was a
that's
studio
true.
film.
Well, for me, 5 was Halloween Kills. So I guess the only thing I really want to ask you is,
Around
what do you
four.
anticipate in that next one?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
In
I
the
was just
follow
getting.
up to so number 5 for me was Halloween, or 4 rather.
Yeah, four.
Uh, oh no, it wasn't. No, Halloween Kills is not on my list. It was A Quiet Place 2.
Okay.
That's my number 4.
All
I
right.
loved it. That's another one I saw in the theater up at the Downer in Milwaukee. One of my
Oh
things
wow.
is when I go to different cities, I love to see local movie theaters, and I
That's
love
really
to
great.
associate a movie with a city for the rest of my life. We brought up Signs. The first time I went to New Orleans, I saw Signs down
Wow.
there. I'll always associate Signs with New Orleans. And now I'm always going to associate A Quiet Place 2 with Milwaukee because it was a quaint little theater, but the movie just was amazing. And it was the first movie I think I saw this year during the pandemic where we were able to take off our masks, you know? So that felt good
Yeah,
in that moment too.
I think you're
It was
right.
during one of those windows where things were kind of okay again.
Well,
Um,
if you remember, John Krasinski held this film's release because he only
mm,
wanted people to see it in the theater.
which makes
So
sense.
it makes sense to what you're saying as well. It's like this was a time where we thought, the pandemic was coming to a much more manageable place, and it clearly hasn't. But yeah, I saw that in the theater too. Yeah.
I will say it doesn't live up to the first one. That
No.
just the novel factor of the first one. I remember seeing that in the theater too. When the whole audience, you could hear a pin drop in there.
Oh my
There's
god.
not
Yeah.
no sound at all, and when there is sound, there's trouble. That first experience of that was a different type of movie going experience for me.
Yes.
This one brought me back a little bit to that, but I think it made up for it not being as original or novel, with much stronger performances from the kids and Cillian Murphy being in it.
Cillian Murphy's always, bringing his A game. I will say the thing I liked about this movie was that when you hear there's going to be a sequel to a movie where one of the main characters isn't going to
Mm,
be in the film, you're
right.
thinking, oh, this is going to be a prequel. And I love that they didn't make this a prequel because you very
Mhm.
easily could have created like an origin story for like these aliens showing up, and they just continued a story.
That
The
being said,
Yeah, go.
that first sequence is the best part of the whole movie,
Yes, yeah, which is a
which does,
flashback. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
kind of
but
does
that could
show
have been
you
the whole
when they
movie, and it
showed up.
wasn't, which I like.
That's true. No, I definitely appreciated that we got to see these characters
Yeah,
move on after that tragedy of the first one.
yep,
And they're all really unique. And then, of course, there's a baby now,
yeah.
which makes things even trickier. Because yeah,
Oh,
that the baby pops out pretty late in the first movie, so
oh yeah,
now
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Which
this constant baggage
how do you control a baby's just
and
crying and
liability
yeah,
of
yeah.
fresh life. Yeah, I dug it. Do you think there's going to be a third? Is there any word on that?
Depending on the success of that sequel, which it probably was,
I think
I
it did
would
do
bet
well.
you money there will be a sequel, a third movie, and I will bet you money John Krasinski wants nothing to do with it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That does. So we have a Batman Forever situation.
Yes. Yeah.
What was your 4?
My four was Coming Home in the Dark.
Oh, Coming Home in the Dark. So we're on to 3. What do you got at
We're
3?
on number three. My number three was The Vigil. Now, this is a movie I streamed not that long ago on Hulu because I kept hearing about how great it was, and it is. Uh, this is one of those. I know it came out. It was a 2021 movie.
I'm still not sure.
Yep. I know it was a 2021 movie, but if you look on like IMDb, it says like 2019. So clearly they
Right.
had some
That's where I
sort
was
of
getting
issue
confused.
getting
Huh.
this out there into the world. This goes back to what you're saying and what we're talking about, like religious horror. And I have never seen, and I'm sure there are films that deal with the Jewish faith and horror, but this was a really great, and in their culture, this is not something that's quote unquote original, but an original
Mhm.
movie idea. In the Jewish faith, when someone has passed away, someone needs to sit with the body overnight to make sure everything's okay. And like that's the
Ward
plot of
off
the
the
movie.
bad voodoo. They're kind of like praying the whole time too. So they're
Yes,
supposed to be praying the
yeah,
whole time and not
correct.
texting.
Great concept for a movie. Really well written, really well executed. This was a great movie that does a good job of not showing, not showing what we're
Right.
afraid of, but setting up things. Whether it's the sound design in the movie or some of like the camera techniques, the lighting, really well made horror movie. And if you haven't seen it,
Well, you're gonna make me go back to it because it doesn't speak to my not liking it because I did, but I started it and I could only get through half of it because I had something else to do. I had to turn
okay,
it off. It wasn't one of those things where I was not enjoying it
sure.
and I turned it off. It was I didn't have the time. And this was only 2 nights ago. So I will finish it out. You're telling me the end really pays off because I love the old lady in it. She's
Oh,
amazing.
she's great, and her
You've
performance was
seen her
really
a
really
lot
great.
before.
Just their dynamic. I don't know where you stopped in the movie. Had he gone into the basement?
No. I think I
Okay.
stopped when there was toenails being cracked on the kitchen
Ooh,
floor.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, no, I'll go back. I definitely
Yeah,
will. Especially if it's that high on your list. There has to be something in that basement.
yeah. Well, again, something that's so probably familiar in a religion, but something I hadn't seen before. I think that's what really, really pulled me in.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
That does sound good. That's kind of like the uh, companion piece to the Saint Maud. It sounds like I saw the Christian version. You saw the
correct.
Jewish face
Yeah.
version of it. So my number three, I just recently saw. I saw it on Christmas Eve, I believe. Antlers,
Oh
starring
man,
the one and only Carrie Russell
I
and
have
Jesse
not seen
Plemons.
this.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah, I know.
Especially because you're a fan of Dark Skies, right? Starring Carrie Russell.
Yes.
Okay, so my only complaint is it kind of felt like structurally a paint by numbers to that movie.
Okay.
Because of course they go and they have that same conversation they had with JB Smoove about what kind of aliens there are to this Native American, knowledgeable fellow who tells them about the Wendigo, which is our big bad in Antlers. Um, I've seen the Wendigo attempted before. I remember there's a Supernatural episode that deals with the Wendigo. It never really hit it in the head, except there was one, The Ritual, I think. That was
Hmm.
kind of a Wendigo. I loved that movie, but I don't think that was explicitly a Wendigo, was
No,
it?
no, I don't believe it was either because that's a North American
Okay.
folklore, and I think the ritual they
Oh
were
yeah,
on
they
a
were in
trip in
Sweden or
Europe.
something. Yes, yes, okay. But it had similar vibes
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Antlers. But what really worked for Antlers for me is that undercurrent. That's for me, horror works the best when the monster is a stand-in for actual societal problems that are
Yeah,
going on. We dealt with a lot of that when we were doing Icon Showdown stuff. What's the
yeah,
deepness there that
yeah.
makes it
It's
actually
Night of the Living Dead.
scary?
It's
Yes.
it's
And
dealing with
yes,
social
absolutely. Race
commentary. Yeah.
issues. This is about addiction
Okay.
and about ultimately wealth disparity because it takes place in a really poor Oregon town
Okay.
where people are just lined up for unemployment. They're lined up to get health for their opioid addictions as well. It's just such a dreary, hopeless place. And on top of that, you have these demons, which are metaphoric for, I think, substance abuse or
Hmm.
depression too, because your main character is dealing with kind of PTSD from an abusive father. Uh,
Gotcha.
and it's this being that gets in you, and it doesn't take you over immediately. You're still you for a while, but you degrade. In a weird way, it's like a virus monster movie because it's not just one Wendigo. It is just one Wendigo, but it's not just one Wendigo without giving it away. Uh, it's sufficiently scary. The creature design is out of this world, and the means in which the Wendigo comes into the world is some of the best horror visuals I've ever seen. It's great, and you can't go wrong with a cast that has Carrie and Jesse
Jesse
and the
Plemons,
kid in it who has as much to do as they do is great. He's great. Watching it with a lady friend, she is not a fan of child actors, but she actually gave this kid credit. She gave me crap for liking
It's
Tommy and Halloween, but she was on board with this little scrapper.
it's a tough thing to do, to find
It is.
a child who's not just saying the lines.
Yeah.
They're not acting.
No, he's pathetic in the best way. Like his
Awesome.
character's supposed to be pathetic, and he pulls it off really well. And it's just it's well rounded. If you like Dark Skies, you're gonna love this because to me they're companion movies. Just one with a antler monster and one with the Greys, aliens coming after a family.
All right.
Got to see it.
Yeah, that was a movie that was on my radar to see, and I believe the pandemic delayed it. I think it just finally came out fall of last year. Just haven't been able to stream it yet. Well,
Yeah,
okay, I think we're on my number 2, which is The Medium.
The Medium. I have not seen that one either.
Oh man, this is a really well-made Thai horror film. This is another religious yet cultural. It has to deal with like a family and a family shaman, and this is a role in the family that gets passed down from like mother to daughter. You don't get to choose if you're going to be this family shaman or spiritual like community shaman. I mean, so everyone comes to you to help deal with like their problems, whether it's like, can you pray for us to have more wealth or better crops, or to get rid of a demon, which it turns really quickly into like a mystery movie. What's going on with it's her niece, and it's really, really well made. It's a longer movie. It kind of reminds me of some of the better South Korean horror films that have come out in the last few years, like The Wailing. I would compare it to The Wailing with
The Wailing. Okay,
with not as much humor, just really well folklore, really well written. I would recommend this to anybody. I watched it on Shudder. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere else yet, but check it out if you can. It's
Shudder's been getting better. They've been churning out some decent stuff of late.
Shudder has a really great library of originals now. Now,
yeah,
things are coming to Shudder for like their release, which is great for the horror genre. You know,
it is. And I'll even say one that came out last year that I watched this year on Shudder would have been my number 1 had it been released this year, and that's Host.
Oh,
Host blew me away. It's such a short movie, but the way that it captured how people communicate during the pandemic via Zoom to take place just on Zoom as it does, and be as effective and scary as it was, I got to give it to Shudder. They nailed it with that one.
Yeah, Host was fantastic. It was clearly something that was put together really quickly too, and required the director to have his actors have some sort of sense of technology, IT skills, because
the digital overlay when there's little moments of AR in it, where a mask pops up that's a callback to an old film, Baby Jane. That moment. My pants were soiled. It was pretty serious.
I would say about The Medium is that, like I said, it's a little bit longer. The second act is a little bit slower, but it's really worth it to get to the third act that really picks up and It takes you to a really creepy place. It turns into like a possession movie.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that one. That sounds like a must see for
Yeah.
sure.
Yep.
Well,
Check it
my
out.
number 2, I saw in Galway, Ireland,
Okay.
and I had no idea what it was going into it. We literally saw the poster and like, we got to see this because the poster screamed "Watch Me" to me. So Censor's about, it's a British horror film about this woman who is a censor for horror films,
Yeah.
who ultimately is one of the few people in charge of what gets cut and whether or not the film can even be distributed at all. Um, that in itself was interesting, and I was hooked right from the top. Just seeing her kind of watch these really ridiculous 80s, because it is set in the 80s too. So you have really ridiculous horror and,
Oh yeah.
blood that looks like candy and stuff. Um, but then it takes a really dark turn where she sees this one movie that is wicked familiar to her. She sees a movie that ultimately is a reflection of something that has happened to her, and she doesn't know how that is possible, a horrific event that has happened to her. So ultimately the latter half of the film is her trying to track down um, the makers of the film, why they made it, how it was made, who's involved. This woman that's in it, who she thinks is potentially her long lost sister, who she lost track of in a very interesting manner. I will say the first 3 quarters are really, really excellent. I'm not sure a lot of people are going to like the last 25% because it's batshit crazy. Like it absolutely
Like
goes,
psychedelic.
like you don't know what's real and what's not anymore, and people could be unsatisfied by that. It
Okay.
becomes very, it's not necessarily psychedelic because there's no substances being taken by characters. It's more the scenario that is led to in the first 3 quarters then makes what's real and what's not impenetrable. You do not know. And I could see some people being a little like, WTF, what did I just watch, sort of thing, to the detriment. But I love that sort of thing. I love when there's some ambiguity
Yeah.
and leave me wondering, because I kept thinking about it for a considerable amount of time after it. And that to me is a sign of a
That's what
good
you
horror.
want. That's what you want in a movie.
Really interesting players too. You'd recognize some of them. I can't come up with the names right off the top of my head. But there's a sleazy director in it that he's been in a lot of stuff. Oh yeah. Have you seen Black Mirror? He's the guy who's in charge of the episode where the woman has committed a crime and then she has to relive this horrible
Yep.
being chased by the town over and over again. It's the guy who's in charge of that. He's a great British actor. You'd recognize him in a heartbeat. I think he's in Blood Shake. What's that? Blood Milkshake that just came out this year too. He's the doctor in that.
Gunpowder milkshake.
Gunpowder Milkshake. Yes, thank you. Yeah, he's in that one too. You'd recognize him in a heartbeat.
All right.
Are we down to our final?
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I would love to say one that people should not see.
Okay.
Because there's one that I thought would be my number 1 of this year that ultimately ended up being one of the worst movies I've seen. I mean, next to Freddy Got Fingered. Freddy Got Fingered is the bottom, and then maybe this one.
All right.
But what's your number 1?
All right. Before I say my number 1, I just want, I guess, everyone to understand that my list would be very different, and I understand that if I was able to see more, I had heard really great things about Censor. I'd heard good things about Antlers. So I just want people to know that, yeah, my list may not be the same as yours, the audience.
Nevertheless, let's big up ourselves here and show that we are kind of qualified. You've seen over 40 horror films this past year.
Oh yeah. I mean,
I've seen roughly around 52, 6 in the theater. So
yeah,
we're not monkeying around.
I appreciate that. That's a good.
When it comes to horror,
it's a good note. Okay, number 1 for me was Malignant.
Oh my God! Oh no! You take it back. You take it back.
I can't.
I was kind of hoping it would be on your list so we could talk about this.
Yeah. I figured you'd want to talk about it.
Yeah.
don't know what to say about this movie except for the fact that it was so campy and
Hmm.
fun,
Yeah,
yet original, with a really great twist. And
I'll give you the twist.
yeah, I mean, love James Wan. Um, so the camera movements, the cinematography, the color, everything was there, and it got people talking.
That's true.
You know, I also love um, the fact that there's probably going to be sequels, and we're probably looking at
Mm,
another franchise here. Not every
I see
horror
that.
franchise is great, but when you've
Right.
got a good franchise, I'm all in. And I just, I don't know. I loved not knowing anything about this movie going into it. Um, I thought it delivered. I thought it delivered.
My preface is I tried to watch this 3 times before I got through it. I think I fell asleep 2 times because I knew it was something I had to watch,
Yeah,
but I really, really struggled with the first half of it.
yeah.
I found it really boring.
Boring. Yeah,
I guess once you get to the twist, okay. And I really
yeah.
like what's going on metaphorically with disease. You know what I mean? That all makes sense with mental disease or even actual physical
Hmm.
cancerous stuff. That I liked. I think I struggled with the lead.
Okay.
That's a big deal too. I didn't really want to follow her around, and I guess once I did get to that halfway point and understood what was really going on, then I didn't mind not liking her as much, and it kind of
Yeah.
made me like the film a little bit more. I will say that I did like the twist, and I did like the direction and cinematography. That was all great.
Yeah.
There was some great effects in it too. Um, but you're right. The camp factor threw me off enough that I couldn't take it seriously,
Sure.
and I just fell asleep twice. That's a bad sign for me, you know.
But here's
Uh,
a good thing is that the horror genre, I think a lot of time, and I do this, I try to justify things within it. Uh, we don't do that when we watch a superhero movie. We don't be like,
that's true.
we're not like, how is that guy flying?
That's true. That's true.
So I think I'm not going to say that you're wrong because camp can throw you out of something. I
And I know why you liked it. I know why a lot of people liked it.
Sure.
It's definitely one of those ones that you love or hate. I feel
Yeah.
like. Uh, I hope they do come back with the second one that
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
knocks my socks off in a way. This one didn't. It was disappointing for me, but I did like the twist, and I thought what was behind what was actually going on was horrifying to look at too.
Absolutely.
That
Great
was scary.
creature design.
Yes.
And here's the thing that I love about specific horror movies that people are going to be talking about this movie for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I love about the horror genre. It's like when people that aren't necessarily even horror fans are talking about it.
Yeah.
It's something's done right and it's got a new spin on it because how many zombie movies, vampire
Right.
movies? Yeah. I
No,
love a
that's
little bit of
that's
originality
true.
and yeah,
To compare it, I don't know. I would give it away because I could compare it to an older horror, classic horror,
sure.
one that's in like the Universal or MonsterVerse even.
Okay.
But even just saying the name of it, I think would give away too much.
Okay.
That being said, I think it will be an amazing Halloween costume for people. You
That's a
know,
good point.
shit, yeah. But I get it. I remember you writing about it and really loving it right at the top, and I think
Yeah,
that's why I eventually did get through it. Um, it just I was expecting something else, and what I got was watchable, but a struggle.
sure,
But I'm
sure.
curious where they can go with it because I do think it's gonna live on
Yeah,
for sure. And my number one is I don't think a lot of people have seen this movie. It's like dramatic horror, another kind of existential horror called John in the Hole.
hmm
Um, It's about this family, includes Michael C. Hall is the dad,
Love him.
and we have Tyza Farmiga as the daughter. But it's really about the son, the youngest son, who, I mean, it's in the trailer, so you kind of get a sense of it. Unprovoked. Well, first of all, he finds this big bunker in the backyard, a half-built bunker, like a big hole in the backyard that they didn't know about it because they have a pretty expansive back forested backyard.
Okay.
And upon finding that, unprovoked, he drugs his whole family and tosses them into the hole and is letting them starve and dehydrate. And he's just living alone. It's like a horror Home Alone, where instead of the parents abandoning him, he abandons his family. And they're just back there, not knowing why they're in this hole. You don't really understand why he does it unless you kind of dig into it. And it's really like he's like Michael Myers in a way, in that
Right.
instead of
Right.
killing other people, he has killed his family. He can't relate with normal humanity. But just the lack of clear motive and the way this kid, it just reminded me of like, I've seen Elephant, which is ultimately a dramatization of the Columbine shooters. He reminded me of that kid, but instead of shooting up the school, he's dismissing his
Yeah.
family, and the world revolves around him. And his relationship with his buddy is very peculiar too. And when people start to show up and be like, "Where's your family?" The way he's able to lie and mimic his own mom's voice
Which
and
is
stuff.
disturbing alone, right there. Like,
Yeah, a little like it's a real horror, you know. It's
yeah,
There's nothing supernatural. There's no blood and guts. It's just psychological devastation
shoot.
to its best. It reminded me of what's that one where the kids come in with Naomi Watts? Or oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it now. But ultimately, they take a family hostage. Oh, Naomi Watts and Tim, the guy from
Oh, it's funny
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 Games.
games,
Funny Games.
and
It
that's a
reminded me a
remake.
lot of Funny Games
Yeah,
with the same director. So the director who
correct.
did the
It's like a
initial
shot for
version then did an
shot.
American version,
Yeah,
which they're both awesome.
that's
But it had that
interesting.
same tone
I will
for
say
sure.
this about the movie, that I am embarrassed that I did not know what it was, that I had not heard of it, and I watched the trailer and was immediately pulled in, and I cannot wait to
It's
watch
haunting.
this. Can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm just so
Yeah, you're going to like it.
confused as to why I didn't hear about this. And the title doesn't necessarily imply it's a horror movie either.
No.
After you know the storyline, sure, that's messed up.
Right. And the whole is ultimately, I think it's just like symbolic of this kid's own depression
Yeah,
and inability to just like relate with anyone.
it's got to
And
fill it. It's got to fill that hole.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, yeah. I can't say enough good things about that one. It really caught me off guard too, with how good it was. Some solid lists. And it seems
Yeah,
like, with the exception of maybe 3 or 4 overlaps, we really kind of had different
yeah,
viewing
very
experiences in
unique
2021.
experiences.
So, was there any movie that you had high hopes for that just let you down this year in the horror verse?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure I might have to take a look.
Well, you
Um,
consider it. I'm going to tell you mine because it's
okay.
from one of my favorite directors. I've seen this guy actually at a Q&A talk about his best movie, District 9.
Oh, of
But
course.
this year he came out with this turd called Demonic, which is so frustrating because the trailer makes it look really, really good.
Yeah.
But then the movie is this convoluted sea wreck. It's
Okay.
just unwatchable almost. I'm not.
Yeah.
I think it was a exercise in masochism to actually sit through it. Uh, the players are not very good. The story is not very good. Ultimately, it's like the best way that I can put it is a Nightmare on Elm Street, but with VR,
Okay.
where you can get messed with when you're in the VR and it
Yeah,
manifests in the real world.
that doesn't
But with
really.
also like a mother-daughter psychological bent to it, and then there's this really weird demon involved that is doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed because I have so much respect for what Blomkamp has done in the past, Neil
Of
Blomkamp,
course.
but this one was like the worst movie I saw all year.
Wow. Uh, I will say I was really looking forward to The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and just thought it was okay.
Yes, very
Yeah.
SESy, very middle ground.
I will say I was pleasantly surprised by the Paranormal Activity Next of Kin.
That was good.
I thought
That was
that
good. The new
was
one
a
was good.
really nice blend of taking what the Paranormal Activity movies were and, putting a little bit new, just
It felt like its
filmmaking
own
into it.
beast. It really did. I'm not even sure why they had to call it Paranormal Activity. If I'm honest
Branding
with you,
to
I feel
sell it,
like it could have
right?
been its own world entirely.
It could have been, but
Um,
would have people seen it?
right,
It may
right.
not have had. You've got a franchise name like Paranormal Activity. You kind of have to use it, I
And it
guess.
was the first person footage, you know what I mean? So I guess in that sense, the way the medium, the way it's actually filmed has Paranormal Activity vibes
Yeah,
to it.
but it wasn't
Um,
100% stuck to that. You kind of
that's
jump back
true.
and forth between being um, their point of view, the camera's point of view,
Right.
and then there's
That's
scenes
true.
where you're just there. You're like,
It was mixed media.
yeah,
And oh my goodness, speaking of holes, that hole was much scarier than the hole in John in the Hole.
oh,
That the hole in Paranormal Activity.
terrifying.
Uh
Talk about claustrophobia.
wow. And the end was badass too.
Yes,
It
yeah,
just really had a great payoff. I was enthralled.
yeah,
I thought it was good. Didn't make my list either, but it's on my you should watch it list.
yeah. There
Didn't
was,
quite make the cut because it wasn't too much that was super original, but what they did have there was executed so well.
yeah,
And
there
good
was,
actors too.
yeah, really well performed moments where you've got your comedic relief actor in there. He was great. Um, the other movie I was going to say I was pleasantly surprised with is another sequel to the Escape Room franchise, and I don't think you've seen
I saw
these.
the first one.
Okay, see, I enjoyed the first one. I thought it was not necessarily a new idea. It's basically
Right.
Saw, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters, and I thought this Escape Room Tournament of Champions, which came out last year, was a nice follow up. It wasn't a new idea, but like the
Mhm.
Saw movies, it was what new um, creative ways can we do to kill people?
Interesting. I liked it. I didn't love it. What I really liked was the end. And it seems like that's what it's building upon
Yeah, yeah,
because you think
I,
one thing's happening and
yeah.
it's
It was a
not.
nice twist. Yeah.
And yeah,
Oh,
I will watch the Tournament of Champions. That does sound interesting, especially if it's less claustrophobic
mm,
too. Would
yeah,
you say it is? It seemed like it's a little more
yeah.
wide open
I would say so.
from the
Yeah,
previews I've seen.
I mean, there's a good chunk of the movie that just sets up before they get into the new escape room. So,
Oh, okay.
um,
So ultimately, because in the first one, not to give too much away, there's kind of winners, if you will. So this is the Tournament of Champions. I'm assuming then it's
correct.
multiple
A
winners
group
of
of
different
people who
escape
have
rooms.
participated in other escape rooms by
Hmm.
the same
Interesting.
creators, or yeah,
Okay.
which I believe
Yeah.
they did in one of the Saw movies as well.
Hmm.
Saw 3, maybe. And the only other thing, as far as like franchise movies goes, like I enjoyed the Forever Purge. I thought it was a nice.
I didn't see it.
Yeah,
Where's it set now? What's the premise of this one?
this was dealt more with the American Mexican border and the
Oh
idea
wow.
of not everyone being okay with immigration,
Yeah.
and then the actual for the purge plot is that the group who run the purge want it to just continue all the time.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. That's
Hmm.
definitely a good take. The Purge does well with taking those societal issues
Oh yeah,
and pigeonholing it into
yeah,
their
political and
concepts.
social satire.
I'll check that out.
Yeah,
One that you probably might have slipped under your radar that I would suggest watching didn't make my list, but it's called Eye Without a Face.
yeah, I don't know that one.
The co-star in it is if you've watched any Sabrina, it's Lucifer from Sabrina, and
Oh
he's
sure,
great.
yeah,
He's really fun, but ultimately it's about this not kid, but kid in his early 20s, let's say, who's kind of a hacker, and he's able to hack into multiple women's webcams, and he's
oh
kind of like
creepy.
overlording over them, but
Yeah.
then it seems as though one of those women that he's watching is serial killer herself.
Love that.
And then she becomes aware of him watching her and starts messing back.
Okay.
So considering it really takes place in only a few locations, I thought it did really well. It wasn't as good as Cam, if you've seen that from a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Cam's great.
But it was in the same department, and I think it's worth watching.
Okay.
I'd give it a shot. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Candyman.
I know. I didn't see it.
You didn't see it yet?
I know. This probably would have been on my list. It probably would have been on my list. I was really excited for it. I heard mixed reviews. That put me off for a while. I wanted things to just fizzle down, and then I just didn't see it, which
it's worth seeing. It's not again on my middling list, but
that's
it
sort
did
of what
let
I meant
me
when I
down.
said my list may have been different if I was able to see more or more of the
I don't think
films.
it would have made your list, honestly.
Okay.
But I don't know. If your Malignant's number one, maybe it would.
Hey, I had to mix it up.
It was interesting. The best part about Candyman is it didn't ignore the first movie, and it pays homage to it and actually incorporates characters from the first one, which I had no idea. I thought it was a complete reboot, but it is a continuation of sorts.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of kills that are really memorable too, but in the end, I feel like it kind of let me down. But it's still, you got to watch it. You got to.
I will. I promise I will. To the horror community, I promise I will see Candyman. We've got a ton coming for you guys. No shortage of ideas for episodes. So subscribe, follow us on social media, on Instagram. It's All the Horrible Things. We're on Twitter, which is
All Horrible.
All Horrible, at All Horrible. And there'll be more. So just follow us. It'll be a weekly podcast. And we're going to get better.
We'll keep you all in the know.
Yeah. The technology is going to get better. I'm going to get a better sound system. So it's in your best interest to listen up.
Watch us evolve into the monstrous beasts we'll soon be.
Into the monsters we truly are.
World.